We have a new podcast cooking over at Black Rosie Media. You might have seen the background to give just a little tease, but we will talk about that and all things Opals Olympic roster coming up.
You have three people who are selfless like that, three people who are dangerously disciplined like that, and you have a coach that also embodies all of those characteristics. You can expect good basketball.
I love interacting with the fans. I'm excited for them to cheer for us because it's hell when you come here. I even welcome people that could be skeptical because it's new.
There's going to be a standard of excellence and discipline in everything that we do.
The Pacific Northwest, this area, how passionate they are. It's culture everywhere, but it's great culture here. And that's what I want to be a part of, to compete for a championship. That's everybody's goal. And I think it's just how we go about things and habits that we create. I want to be around winners. That'll help us get closer to that.
And that's what the fans can expect. And we're going to have some fun.
All right, Black Rosie Media fans, welcome to our newest women's basketball podcast covering the WNBA and adjacent topics. My name is Erica L. Ayala. I am the founder of Black Rosie Media, where we empower Black women and melanated creators in sports media through our coverage in women's sports. And I am joined by our latest contributor, Roberta Rodrigues, who will introduce themselves in just a minute. But I am so excited, Roberta. We connected years ago while you were actually working with the Seattle Storm. So it was mostly via email. And then we got to meet, I guess, in Everett, I think it was.
Yeah, if we met here in Seattle, I think it was in Everett. You were covering the Storm, right? And I was handling credentials. Yes. I think that was the case. Yeah, I think that's how we first we first met.
Yes, and then connected and reunited in my hometown of New York City at the ESPNW Summit. And that's when I was like, you know what, let's try and make this official if we can, bring you on the platform to talk all things Storm women's basketball and some Olympic coverage. You're going to help with that. But Roberta, I introduced you briefly, but I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our Black Rosie Media fan base and tell us a little bit about yourself, about some of the work that you do on your own accord and how you got into covering Storm women's basketball on now this side of media.
Oh, yeah. My name is Roberta Rodrigues. I've been covering women's basketball since 2008. I'm originally from Brazil. My love for women's basketball started in 2006 with the World Cup. So kind of went backwards with how people start following women's basketball here in the U.S. I first started following FIBA, and then I learned about the WNBA from FIBA because that year Lauren Jackson was playing with Australia. So 2008, 2007, 2008, I started a blog in Brazil with a group of 4 other women who we are now really good friends, called WNBA Brazil. We started covering, and at that time 2008, I was in my junior year of high school. Is that the one before the last? Yeah. I was on my junior year of high school. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I decided, I had the brilliant idea that I wanted to be a journalist who to cover women's sports because, definitely did not want to be rich for choosing that. It's funny because I told my parents that I wanted to be a history teacher or a women's basketball journalist. And they were like, oh my God, we're supporting her for the rest of our lives. But anyways, I started covering in 2008, mostly as a hobby. 2011, I started college, and in Brazil, you already know what your major is going to be when you start. So I went to journalism school, got my bachelor's in 2014, and during that time, I did a lot of PR stuff, interned with the National Men's Basketball League, met Erica de Souza, ended up working for her as her PR. 2016, she played for the Sky. I decided to visit her and had this other crazy idea of just staying in the United States. My visa expired and everything, but I just like stayed because I knew that that's how I would have like a better chance of connecting with, you know, people like you, Erica, and just like being, you know, on the ground. So yeah, it talks a lot about the privilege of being born in the US in this women's sports environment where like you have that access. In my case, I literally had to break the law for 4 years. I left now, but it makes her a funny story. So during that year, I built relationships, and in 2020, during the COVID pandemic, I created Beta Basket, which ended up being my ultimate women's basketball platform. I've had many others previously, but Beta Basket is now where all of my work has ended up, and it became the first women's basketball news portal in Latin America. We are kind of like shifting things. I'm going back to writing because I was working at the Star, so it will be a lot. There will be a lot of conflict of interest, and I was also finishing grad school and writing a capstone. So I'm finally back at it, just writing on my own platform and trying to partner with amazing people like Erica to, you know, expand the reach. And I think that most importantly, I want to show people that good things come from Latin America and Latin American women's sports creators. I feel like there isn't like a lot of room for people who have an accent, you know. So I really appreciate you, Erica, for this opportunity.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for laying out that story, and it's beautiful. And I always love hearing people's origin stories or what they're comfortable sharing. And I do apologize because I usually am very good at asking people to pronounce their names as they want to hear it. So I'll have to work on that. Roberta, did I get it right?
Yeah, you got it right. And you know, that's talking about the whole, like, you know, Latin American people, diversity, etc. I default to saying Roberta when I first meet someone because I get embarrassed of having to tell people that it's R but sounds like an H. So it's my default, and I am learning to just say from the get-go. So really not bad at all. And I appreciate you acknowledging and asking.
Of course. No, I think that's important. And so it's also and this is something I know we've talked about this before. And I think people who follow me and others, and especially in hockey, know that it's important for me to at least try to pronounce the player's name again as they want to hear it, as they recognizes it, you know, and sometimes that does mean getting comfortable with accents that I might not be used to, such as you know, how people on Team Czechia say their name, or how people with Aboriginal or Indigenous names hear their name. I think that's really important. And so we welcome you and how you present your name, your language, how you speak. It's all
Thank
good.
You. Appreciate it. And I gotta say, no one says Damiris Dantas like you. Like, I gotta say that. No, I'm not joking, because I remember during the Wnba season, there was this post Minnesota Lynx game where they spent like, I think, a good like 2 minutes trying to say Damiris' name correct, and they finally got it. I feel like you got it faster than anyone, and you say it better than anyone. So I love when you I think I love when you say her name. It's very cool.
Yes, I'm glad she's back in the league too.
Me too. So happy.
It is so. And again, and that's just one of those things. It's practicing with athletes. And to be honest, I mean, you and I kind of have talked about this. This was not even on our rundown, but I love it.
Sorry.
I know, but no, this is an important conversation, and that's why I tried to get creators who are from different backgrounds than me, so we can have this conversation. Like Misha Jones, who helps out on Gotta Get Up. We've had conversations on people who are non-binary or more masculine presenting, and who use she, her pronouns. And I've learned a lot from Misha and them being open and their authentic self. And she's, helped me along to make sure that we are really celebrating all that is. And it's the same with people, and especially with their names. So, but I do remember that with Damiras, because there was also something that was coming from a major network, and you know how you can hear something, but if you don't have the background of the language where it's coming from, you can easily misinterpret the emphasis. And I think that's what's happening. And I was like, Duntus? That doesn't sound very Portuguese.
Yeah. It's kind of like it's a big thing also now with Camila Cardoso, right? Because people are saying Cardosa, or people are gonna write her name with S. And there was also this other situation during when I was at the Dallas Wings post game Zoom after Stephanie Soares' first game. And I, people here say Suarez. I was like, so can you talk a little bit about what you saw from Stephanie Soares? And I think it was Kalani Brown and Arike who were in the presser. They were just like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. That's how you say her name. And like, and they were like, so Kalani was trying to roll it out of her tongue to try to say the same. And you see that like people want to have their names, it's cultural. It tells a lot about your story. So it's very important. Really cool.
Yeah, and I love that you said Suarez, because again, for those who speak Spanish, we might also say Suarez.
Yeah.
It's not Suarez, but it's not Suarez. So it's just the emphasis, is a little bit different. So those things are important, like you said. And here at Black Rosie Media, we really try to embrace that. Now, we can't guarantee we'll always get it right.
No. If you try, it's good enough. That's okay.
We will always try. And actually, Camila, her mother's name is Suarez. So yes. But okay, let's get to what we are going to be talking about. So, Roberta, we talked a little bit about your background, and I want to talk about what that's going to look like as we continue to partner together. So a little bit of that will be, as we are teasing right now, covering the Seattle Storm, because you are in the Emerald City in the Pacific Northwest. I miss it. I'll be there in the
very
fall.
hot in here. I have a fan right on my face.
I will be there in the fall, mostly for some hockey stuff, but hopefully the Seattle Storm will still be playing. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But you're also going to be helping, because Black Rosie Media will be covering the Olympics, and particularly the women's basketball tournament. So that really gets us to what we want to talk about in our first quarter. So for those not familiar with our podcast, Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, which, as you probably deduced, covers the New York Liberty. We're going to do a similar format here for our to be named. We have some names that we're tossing around.
Yep.
We haven't gotten a final, but we are going to follow that same format of the shoot around, which is bigger topics, and then our first quarter. So let's get into the first quarter here. We had some other topics, but we'll tease those, or we'll trickle them in. I want to talk about the Opals, because that's the women's Australian national team. For basketball, I should say, because they all have cute little nicknames. I love it. And so we know that the Opals roster was named over the weekend, and there's always been a connection between the Opals and the WNBA, or at least it feels that way, but specifically in Seattle. And that is because of one Lauren Jackson, who has retired multiple times, but Roberta will be back to play for the Opals in Paris, making her one of 3 5-time Olympians for Australian basketball.
I am not sad about that. I gotta say, I do want Lauren, yes, I want Lauren Jackson to rest. I want Lauren Jackson to enjoy her post-retirement life with her boys. But the honor and the privilege of having the chance to watch Lauren Jackson play, we all deserve that. And this is something that every honestly, that every sports fan needs to experience. Lauren Jackson, she created the modern post player that we have today. The being able to play in the paint, under the basket, and still stretch and shoot for three. What she did for Australia, for the Seattle Storm, and for the women's basketball in general, revolutionized the way that bigs play. And I love that we're going to get to watch her play another Olympics. She deserves it because she unfortunately retired too soon due to injuries. And she was like, I had so many surgeries. My knee, I recovered from one surgery. I have to go to another. I want to live my life. I want to have kids. So I have to make a choice. And I think it shows so much like emotional intelligence to be able to make that choice, to prioritize yourself, because she did that. She got off the court. She took care. She took really good care of herself. She is in prime shape. You cannot tell that she. I mean, I hope this is not an ageist thing to say, but she does not look 43 as someone would expect someone to look 43. She is in prime shape, and she's dropping 50 points at the NBL 1 in Australia, which she's back. She has retired. She said that she was not going to go back this last qualifier, which they played in Brazil. She was like, no, I'm not going to the Olympics. Fast forward to today, she is making the Olympics. And that is not uncommon internationally. There is a player from the Brazilian national team, Adrianinha, who retired, came out of retirement, retired again, came out of retirement, because the development cycle is different from here in the US. Like, most of us don't have college sports in the way that we have here, so we rely a lot on most seasoned players like Erika de Souza in Brazil, for example. So that has a lot to do with that. And also, I think Sani Brondella and the Australian Federation just have a lot of respect for LJ, and they're gonna like, no, she's gonna play because we know that she can make a difference. Put her against they're very difficult matchups in this Olympic. So like, put LJ against like France, against Japan, against, you need that experience, you need that body over there.
Like, even I'm thinking of China, Hanchu.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Griner.
Yep. Exactly. So it's like, she makes a difference. It's not just like, oh no, let's just give her the history, which is the same thing that people are saying with Diana Taurasi. Like, no, like, the Olympics are completely different. People talk about the physicality of the WNBA. People are going to be playing Gabby Williams in the Olympics. Gabby Williams is probably the strongest player. Like, she is, like, people here in the WNBA cannot like stop her or pass through her because of just not only the amazing basketball player that she is, but because she's super strong. And then you have Mahinjo Haynes, who is also like, you look at her, it's like, oh, tiny, but she's also so strong.
Very spry too. Both of them, Gabby Williams and Maureen Johannes, will be playing for the host nation.
Yep. And then you have like, oh my God, Germany. Like, you got the, like, it's hard to face one Sabali sister separately. Like, you get one Sabali in Dallas and you get another Sabali in New York. Think about facing the both of them together in the paint. You want Lauren Jackson there.
I'm just hoping that they're both healthy, to your point. We talk about this on Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. Niara has not been healthy just kind of, I want to say maybe spasms, back spasms. So it's something that you can play through, but also is not very comfortable to play through. And then, of course, Satu coming off of, actually, you mentioned qualifiers where Brazil and Germany had.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Like,
we'll probably get into that a little bit more once we get into our Olympic coverage. But, unfortunately, Satu, who had a fantastic season last year and was not injured. She got a shoulder injury, has had some surgery. So we'll have to see what's going on there. But let's get back to the Seattle Storm connection with the Opals, with the Opals, because there is someone who is also a mutual of us over on the Gotta Get Up podcast, and that, of course, is Sami Whitcomb, who is set to make her Olympic debut, if you believe it or not, for the Opals.
Yeah, she is super excited. She had already defended Australia in 2 World Cups. She was also in the, of course, other qualifiers and 1 Asia tournament. But that's her first Olympic. And when you talk to athletes, the Olympics are the utmost stage. It doesn't mean that the WNBA, the NBA, European domestic leagues do not have their own weight in significance, but the Olympics is a world, it's world. You have the best of the best from every country in one place, and you're matching up against each other. So Sami is just very happy, very proud. She was born here in the U.S. She was born in California. She went to UW, but she has built her whole life in Australia. She's married to an Australian person. Both her kids are. I know that the second one is definitely Australian. I'm not sure about the first one. Don't want to assume. So she has dedicated so much time to Australia and to making them get back to the level, because for in the last Olympics, Australia didn't really do so well, and then they made their way back. Honestly, I knew that was going to happen because Australia is Australia, and in the women's basketball scenario, they're a powerhouse right there with the US. You can't talk international powerhouses without talking Australia. So I pulled up the quotes that I got from Sami. She's just so excited to be on that team. She was really looking forward last time that I talked to her, exactly because it would be her first. And not only her, but we're going to talk about her later, Ezi. But Ezi's just excited that she's in her second Olympic, but her first Olympic with fans, because the other one was COVID.
Right. Which got delayed a year to 2021. But like you said, you were able to speak to the players. We love having you around. And so I'd love for you to relay what Sami Whitcomb had to tell you and media about playing for Team Australia.
Yeah, it's the highest honor. She is going to be able to. She said this is what every athlete strives for. To be able to play at the Olympics is something that there's nothing that matches it. And she's gonna be. She talked about Jade. Jade and Isabel. So she said that she expects a lot from them, which is, I love that, who are the youngest in the team. So that is really cool.
And Isabel, I think it's Borlays.
I don't know if it's Borlays or Borlas. I have to look.
Yeah, so there's some, and so there is a lot of overlap. Well, a decent amount of overlap. We talked a lot about Lauren Jackson, but Rebecca Allen is now with the Phoenix Mercury, also a mutual of Gotta Get Up. Or who we'll talk about, as you mentioned, in a little bit, Alana Smith, who's been really great.
Yeah.
This year.
Oh my God. Yep.
Steph Talbot, who was like with New York for like a second and has also, if I'm not mistaken, played in Seattle. We have Christy Wallace, who's with the Indiana Fever. They just got a big win over New York. We're going to talk about that with Brian Florentin on Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans going live later in the week. And you mentioned Jade Melbourne, and then of course Sami Whitcomb. Now, Ezi, as you alluded to, making her second Olympics, first one with fans, which was something that she noted. But Ezi's been in a few conversations when it comes to the WNBA, but specifically because, at least on the U.S. side of things, because the WNBA is a domestic league of the United States, we have seen in the last 2 Olympic cycles that the WNBA and USA Basketball have partnered to make the All-Star Weekend a little bit of a send-off for Team USA. They'll have a mini camp, and all of the players from Team USA will compete in the All-Star game, but as Team USA, which means, of course, we need a Team WNBA for them to compete against. And Ezi not on that list, Roberta. Thoughts coming from the
everyone here in Seattle is very upset. That's the general feeling. Everyone is very upset, but most I think what's not funny, but it's cool to see is how protective the Storm players and the Storm coaching staff is being so protective of Ezi throughout this whole process. Jewel has said time and time again she should have been an All-Star. The Storm social media, just a little shortly after the All-Star roster was announced, they like Ezi appreciation post. So everyone expected Ezi to be an All-Star. I mean, it's not, who would not, right? She is averaging like 13.4 points per game and 9 rebounds per game. So she's almost averaging a double-double. And she's almost like a silent killer. Especially being on this Storm squad that you have Jewel Lloyd and Nneka Ogwumike first to kind of like take the lead in scores, but you have almost a double in averages plus 2.6 blocks per game. Not this last game, but the one previous, she had 8 blocks in a game. If you ask me, this is all-star behavior. But it is very hard. So this All-Star roster was more difficult to make than in other editions because you only had 12 selections. The other 12 were already picked with the All-Star, with the Team USA. And I even question, like, do you count that an All-Star selection? Like, you know, I understand that people would count it. I think there should be another like name, another like, you know. Anyways, I think that Ezi deserved really well. She was snubbed of the opportunity. I think I'm afraid of the internet. And what people say with all you speak. So I think that yes, she was snubbed, but it's not completely not understandable, just because of the limitations that this 12 roster offered, and also because my understanding is that the All-Star game is almost like a popularity contest. And we know what team is the popular team right now. We know what team is, you know, they have 3 players in the All-Star in the team, you know. So I expected her not to be named to the All-Star team, not because I didn't think she deserved, but because of popularity and the popularity contest.
Yeah, that's interesting. And, you know, I do have a media vote. And so we talked about this on it up. So you'll see Ezi's on my list.
She was on mine every time that I voted.
Yeah, Ezi's on my list. Skylar Diggins-Smith also on my list. You know who's not on my list? Jewel Lloyd. And that is because, to be clear, in 2024 and in 2021, because I had a vote then, I did not vote for anyone who was already confirmed for USA. For me, that's the, you know, I wanted it to be a true team WNBA. And those athletes are not going to compete for the WNBA team a la Jewel Lloyd. They're going to compete for Team USA. So I thought that gave an opportunity to add other teams into the mix. And so for me, though, I'm not mad that NECA is an all-star at all, like at all. And you can see from my personal ballot that I did not vote for NECA.
Yeah, I saw it.
You know,
I saw it. Yeah.
It goes back and forth because is NECA deserving of an all-star cumulatively? Absolutely.
Yeah.
If I think, and I do vote on all-star for the season in which the game is taking place. If it's a tight race between players, I might consider breadth of work. But for the most part, I really do vote not only on the season that we're in, but I vote late as I can get away with.
That makes sense. That's smart.
And so there are people that I thought, like, I was gutted that I left at the time I voted Kennedy Carter and Dejanay Carrington off my list. Because I'll be honest, Skylar Diggins-Smith, when I did my eye test, so I do an eye test list before I look at stats. I'm like, based on what I've seen, what I'm talking about, who do I think is going to make the all-star? And I write those names down. And then I leave it. And I let the games play out. I don't look at it. And then when I make my final vote, I write down the names based on stats. And then I compare lists. That's just how I do it.
Oh, okay.
Else.
That's
yeah. At the time, if I had voted at kind of the halfway point, you know, when they did the early returns, I don't think Skylar would have made my list.
I agree. Yeah.
But then when I voted about a week and a half ago now of us recording, Skylar and the Seattle Storm actually have been moving in a different direction. And that kind of takes me to the third quarter. So coming in, again, we have a podcast on Black Rosie Media where we talk about the New York Liberty. So of course we talked a lot last season about super teams. And Roberta, you know this better than most. Coming the Seattle Storm were added to the list of super teams. And if I'm being honest, the early returns weren't great.
No.
But to your point, you talk about popularity, and I think I see this in other sports. Seattle's also an interesting city because a lot of people do consider it a larger city. It has baseball, NWSL, WNBA. It now has a hockey team, college football, college sports just in general, huge in the area. And it still kind of has a small city feel. And
it does.
Feel. And some of that matters as well when it comes to things like media attention and all-star. So I always find it interesting. I'm not throwing any shade because I do love the Emerald City. I really, really do. And I just thought it was interesting that they got a super team moniker. And when they weren't necessarily so super, which happened to New York last season, which happened to Seattle, but what happened to the Aces this year, everyone was just like, oh, okay, and like backing into the bushes. But there wasn't any, at least from a national perspective, it didn't seem like they were getting the criticism that New York got last year, that Vegas even got this year. And I think that's fine because some of that was over the top. And all three teams, I would say, are stabilizing in a pretty good way. But I still think there's something about Seattle that makes them a dark horse. What is your take, being in Seattle, about all of that?
So I think that the Storm was deemed a super team when the free agency moves happened. I think that they did draft super names. They drafted super names. Does it make for a super team? I think that when we talk about super team, we're not talking about just history of player. We're talking about the moment of the player and the moment of the team and familiarity.
Yeah.
You can bring super players together and they are still not going to be a super team at that moment until they find the connection.
Hey, I agree. Covering the New York Liberty,
Yeah. So like it's a team of super players that makes not even great. It makes an outstanding team. I feel like calling it a super team is kind of like a headline grabber, like clickbait. I mean, as with anyone, but I feel like what made the Aces a super team is that core had been together for such a long time. And like, should they do I think the Aces is a super team? If Chelsea Gray had been healthy the whole time, they would have been a super team from the start. Because that's the thing, a super team is super, so anyway, so I think that Seattle did have a rocky start, and they did have much less. I'm not sure I understood what it was, but they did have much less criticism. I think because there was less expectations from them coming from the season that they had last year. Because even though they brought really good players, you didn't know it was going to be like, considering last season was really bad.
Right.
So I think that's what makes them a dark horse. It's completely, you don't know what to expect, to be very honest. It's like the game against Chicago. Did anyone expect Chicago to win the way they did? No. And after that victory, did anyone expect the Storm to win the other game? No. And honestly, I think this is a trend in the WNBA this season. You don't know who can win. And I asked Neka about it. I was like, so what? The season seems very unpredictable. What do you make of it? What does it say? And she said something very interesting, which was like, listen, I know that in the past 2-3 years there were powerhouses named, but this league has a lot of parity, and I've played in seasons when you never know who's going to win. So now I think there are just more eyes seeing that it's happening. This is an elite level league, and the unpredictability, it makes for an interesting product. It makes for an interesting game. So it was interesting to hear that from Neka, being in the team she is, and having played. If you ask me, that Los Angeles Sparks team that she was in, that won the championship, that was a super team. Any team that has Candace Parker is a super team, in my opinion.
And they had Chelsea Gray. That was a mean team. And
oh my god!
Yeah, but
my god!
Neka comes over, Skylar Diggins-Smith coming out after taking time away, which at first was time away because things didn't seem like they were going very well in Phoenix.
Yeah.
Some of that was under Vanessa Nygaard. Of course, Sandy Brondello was, they did not renew her contract. That's how she ends up in New York. We didn't actually talk about Sandy when we talked about the Opals, but she will once again be the head coach. I think everything that you say also leads me to wonder where we will see the Seattle Storm team as they develop, but also given that respective to Sandy Brondello, who's now in New York, and Becky Hammon, who in fairness is a new WNBA head coach, coaching in the NBA, in the MNBA for years.
MNBA, yes.
So not new to coaching, but a new WNBA head coach. Comparing that to Noelle Quinn, who also will be at the Olympics as a coach for Team Canada.
Yeah.
I think Noelle Quinn's, Noe as she's known, because she played in Seattle and then immediately moved over to the coaching side in Seattle. I think that her path, it's unwritten, to quote Natasha Fields, not as decorated as the other super team head coaches.
Yeah. And what makes the Storm a dark horse, I think, is exactly that. The last season was very atypical, so I think it bled a little bit on the expectations for this season, because if I'm not mistaken, Storm ended as 11th place, I think.
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
they're down there.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that has happened. I think that happened, if I'm not mistaken, that happened with Minnesota, that they went from 11th to like playoff or even champion. But the team that the Storm had and the players that they brought, and again, they are all extremely like talented and just outstanding players. They are not at their peak anymore, which doesn't make them any less good. But when it comes to like analytics conversations, people take that into consideration, and I think that's why no one expected the Storm to be doing as well as good as they're doing.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I think that's a big factor, because if you told me 3 years ago that you would have Jewel Lloyd, Neka Ogumake, Skylar Diggins-Smith, Ezi Magbegor, and Jordan Horston playing on the same team, I would say without a question in mind that they would be the WNBA champions. Like, I'm not joking. Neka Ogumake, she is one of the best players to ever play in the face of the earth. And I'm considering NBA players too. Like Neka, and she's not only a good player, she's so consistent, and she's consistently making her team succeed. And I think that's a very important factor to take into consideration. So, but when it comes to, like, we are media, we talk, we make analysis. We can't predict the future. We can try to forecast the future based on what happened in the near past. Right. And considering the near past, we wouldn't consider the Storm like a solid contender, but now but now I think that, and that's kudos to, like, honestly, I think that Pokey Chapman, once she came in as assistant general manager, she shifted things around, and Jewel Lloyd has spoken about that time and time again. Every time that she talks about the off-season moves, she mentions Pokey Chapman and how important she was for the current layout of the Storm. Yep. Pokey Chapman is a legacy creator. Yeah. She created the Chicago Sky that became champions. Yep. She brought in part of the bases that is in the Fever today. Mm-hmm. She's the one who gave Erica Wheeler a chance. No other coach took a chance on Erica Wheeler, and I know she's not very popular right now because of the, anyways. But Pokey Chapman has a vision like no other, right? And I knew that the Storm was going to succeed because of her touch. And Neka, Skylar, Jewel, you can't go wrong with that. My concern was with how things happened last year and how kind of like all over the place the Storm was. I wasn't sure if that would transition well into a winning franchise this year, but I'm glad it did. They're doing really well, and you can tell that. I mean, I was in with them last year, right? I was like traveled with the team once. You see the vibes are different. The vibes are like top tier, as Asia Wilson would say. Players are happy, and even when they lose, you can tell that they keep their heads up. And Noe is amazing. I mean, Noe is probably one of the best people to ever walk on the face of the earth.
So intelligent when it comes to, well, a lot of things, but in particular, we're talking about basketball. And I think that she's definitely, again, a younger coach in a lot of ways than, again, some of these other quote unquote super teams. And I think, again, she's so intelligent. She really shows up for the work. She works hard. I think she's very, in a lot of ways, I find her to be transparent and honest, and she can assess things fairly. You know, I think at least in media, she doesn't get worked up too much. It's very rare that you see that. Now with her players, she'll be a little more animated, but she's pretty calm and, you know, even mannered when it comes to media. And again, sometimes in the way the media cycle works, that can almost work against your team when it comes to conversations about your team. But I think it works very well as you're building and establishing your team, because I know something going into the off season with the Seattle Storm, to a lot of what you said, Roberta, is they wanted to get back to that championship culture. The Seattle Storm are one of 3 franchises to have 4 titles. And all 4 of those came under Sue Bird, who of course is now a part of the ownership group. And there's some rejiggering that you have to do. The other 2 for clarity are the Minnesota Lynx, and the only team to ever do them consecutive would be the Houston Comets. RIP.
Can they come back, please?
We want them back so bad. Yeah, so there's a lot of history for Seattle. They've also invested. The Seattle Storm has always been a team that has invested very heavily. They were one of the first WNBA teams to have an all-woman or a women-led leadership group. And the way we see things going in sports media, unfortunately, on the really bad side of things, with problematic at best, abusive at worst coaches that are recycled, where we see that sometimes in the NHL. We unfortunately see that in the NWSL. I think that the Seattle Storm have been able to maintain their values even when they've had those up and down seasons. And you have to give credit to Sue Bird, Lauren Jackson, Jewel Lloyd played out of her mind last season and should have gotten a lot more respect when it came to MVP voting.
Oh my God. She was my MVP.
She was a scoring champion on a bottom 4 team and just doing things that have literally never been done before. And we can go into this, and we'll probably talk about it as this podcast continues, but I'll just say it right now in case you don't listen to Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. I am not best player, best team. That's not how I vote.
No. Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
It's an individual award.
Exactly. And also, like, LOL, because I think sometimes people say that and then they change their tune, but that's a story for another day. But in our format, go ahead.
Can I just say a little thing? Just a little. I always found that a very interesting fun fact. If I'm not, I think only one guard in WNBA history has won MVP, and it's Diana Taurasi. So. I think so.
Cynthia Cooper maybe have one too, maybe.
Yeah, I think in more of the recent history.
Yeah.
So that also does not work in in the early years you had Cynthia Cooper. Sherry Swoops was more.
Yeah, I think she's won before, but she's more of a combo, I would say.
So it doesn't work in Jewel's favor.
Right. That's an excellent point. I think a lot of awards, unfortunately, are like that. But I brought that up because, I think that a lot. But as I was saying, so in our format, we will save the 4th quarter we will be going live with these shows. So if you're watching on YouTube now or you're listening on audio, stay tuned because once we get the Seattle Storm show up and running on the other side of the Olympic break, we'll have a chance for you to send in your comments live in the chat, but you can also join the Black Rosie Media Slack channel. And that's a way, if you have burning questions for any of our hosts on any of our shows, that's the way to make sure you get the questions in the show. So join the Slack community. We'll put that in the show notes. So check it out. You can also head over to the Black Rosie Media YouTube page and, of course, at Black Rosie Media on Twitter. And we'll post it on Instagram as well and TikTok. If you want to join our Slack community, it's absolutely free, but you can engage with the hosts and get your questions in. But since we're not going live on this first trailer, this, kind of our pilot episode, this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about and end the conversation with where the Seattle Storm are we're through 21 games. And we kind of mentioned it before, but there's two teams that as of today, when we're recording on July 8th, have an 8-2 record. And that's the Las Vegas Aces and the New York Liberty. The Aces right now sit in 5, and that has a lot to do with their slow start. And the New York Liberty are in the number 1 spot, but share an identical record with the Connecticut Sun. They do have, though, the head-to-head, and they have more conference wins, which is why they right now are in that number 1 spot. But right ahead of Vegas, the Seattle Storm, 7-3 in their last 10 games. They're one of 3 teams with a 7-3 record, the aforementioned Connecticut Sun and the Minnesota Lynx, who are in that 3rd spot. And the Seattle Storm are 14-7 overall. So they do have a winning record. Those 7 losses, though, similarly to the Vegas Aces, a bit of a blemish early in the season. And but I like, and I think the Chicago series, because they had 2 consecutive home games with Chicago, I think is really indicative of what could make the Storm a contender and why they're one of the top 4 teams in the league right now, because they were able to make some adjustments. Now, arguably, the biggest adjustment that was made was actually on the Chicago side. A little bit of controversy, and it actually—
I'm biased.
No, I'm setting you up. I know this is going to be a Seattle Storm podcast, but Camila was involved in that. She, was playing what seemed to be good minutes and then was benched down the stretch for a little bit there. And the Storm were able to gather themselves and get that win to split that home series with Chicago. Roberta, you were there for the games. You were talking to the players on both sides, hearing what they were saying post-game. What are your biggest takeaways from the Storm perspective first regarding that series with Chicago?
For the first game, there was definitely some surprise, kind of like you could feel a sense of surprise and frustration within the Storm because they just couldn't grab rebounds. They couldn't put the ball in the basket. They had 27 rebounds that game, and they've been averaging 36 per game this season. The reason being, Chicago has the Chicago skyscrapers, Camila and Camila Cardozo and Angel Reese. So they locked in the paint. They did not let Ezi Magbegor score. Ezi had 9 points only, and she was shooting, I think, 16% up until the last minute, until she went ahead, she had 4 consecutive points and ended with 13 points, but she was not able to score. Who was the person on assignment on Ezi? Camila Cardozo. So she did an amazing job of neutralizing Ezi, and that I feel like that was the main factor in the Chicago Sky having won that game, because if Ezi was on her usual pace, she would have scored much more. Now, Ezi had a major night in blocks, 8 blocks. That's insane. When you think of how many blocks a player can have, she had 8 blocks in a game that has, and she's playing against someone who is 6'7", and she still has 8 blocks. Come on, that's all-star behavior right there.
Yeah.
to go back to it. But there was a lot of frustration. The Storm was really struggling with getting the paint. A little, the shots from the outside weren't really working because there were turnovers. So there was some frustration going on. Chicago was very happy. And that's why yesterday's game was very surprising. Camila was definitely the differentiator there. People were saying that it was going to be her breakout game. In the first quarter, she had 6 points, 8 rebounds, and 3 blocks already. So she played the entirety of the first quarter. She played the second one. She finished the first half with 4 blocks. Third quarter comes, she plays half of it. The Storm has a big run, and Teresa Weatherspoon benches Camila, and she doesn't play again. anymore the rest of the game. As it took off, the storm took off. Excuse me. Teresa decided to play Isabel Harrison, and everyone was very confused because even though Ezi was scoring more, I mean, I think she had 11 or 13 points, there were so many turnovers, and you could clearly feel the confusion in the Sky players' like face. They would, it's like they would get the ball and immediately go to pass it to either Camila or Angel, but Angel stretches, so she's not always there. They would look for Camila, she was not there, and Isabel Harrison is not as tall, is not as strong, so she wouldn't hit the same shot. And on the other end, on the defensive side, the Storm was getting away with anything. They were doing everything. They were putting in every basket. So that was the absence of Camila was the big differentiator, and no one could understand why. Like, why are you going to take the player who she might not have been scoring much, but she was defending, which honestly could have won that game.
Mean, it's really interesting. I think it's worth noting two things. One is an observation, and I believe I don't know if it was against Seattle or the game before that, but Camila, who missed a stretch of time in the beginning of the season for the Chicago Sky, she got a little banged up, and she came out of a game with a little funny little tweak or something like that. That's the first observation. The second observation that I will make is I know Teresa Weatherspoon very well with respect to from a media perspective. I watched her growing up as a child, and I've been able to, since she was with the New York Liberty and now since coming back to the WNBA, I like to think that I have an idea of at least where her mindset is. The only thing I can think of, and I don't want to speculate, but there was something, either it was an injury and it was protecting Camila, and Teresa was willing to take the heat, because she is taking heat right now. She's taking a lot of heat. People are calling for her job. And again, as you've already outlined, it's a noticeable difference. And as a coach, there's no getting away from that. I'm almost leaning towards maybe Camila wasn't exactly 100%, and there was something that they wanted to just take a look at. The only other thing that would make sense, I don't think that it doesn't seem to me to be something that would be an issue with Camila, is if there was something that Camila, she maybe didn't reach the expectation with an execution issue, dare I say even an attitude issue. I'm not saying that this is what happened.
No, I get it.
From my perspective, that's the only other reason in a game where you just played this team and Camila was such an important part of the win. Those are the only two reasons that I can think of. One, Teaspoon is protecting her player, and then the other, Teaspoon is protecting the team expectations and just kind of the team chemistry.
No, I agree with you. And like I said, I'm biased. I wanted to see Camila play. Like, I was dying to see Camila play. I went to I usually go to the Storm post game presser, but I was like, I'm gonna go to the Sky because in this case, Camila is the person that I want to focus my coverage on.
Sure.
So I was in, and I know that Teresa, I have so much respect for Teresa. And like I was like, I'm afraid of asking and her like yelling at me. But like, I would be doing a bad job as media if I didn't ask why Camila didn't play. So at the end of the day, I felt bad because I asked, she answered, and then people started like saying a bunch of stuff. Do I think it was the wrong decision? Of course I do. Like, but I'm not a coach. That's where I am. Like, I may think it's wrong. I think it's wrong, but that's my opinion. I am not a coach. I am someone who watches and reports.
Right.
Am I entitled to my opinion? Of course I am. Am I entitled to think that my opinion is right? No. Because Teresa Weatherspoon is a legend. She is a legend, and she has like a basketball mind of her own. But not only that, the respect that those players have for her and the way that they look at her, the way they talk to her. Like, if she wants to bench Camila for this game, for a game, that's the game to do. That's before the Olympic break. That's a few games after she got in. That's the season, because this is also a newly formed Chicago Sky. You know, when you have a new team, you have to experiment. You have to try different things.
Yeah.
You can, and Teresa, she's a legend. It's also her first year in the WNBA.
Yep.
She has to try. Like, you can't expect her not to try. And it's almost unfair to compare her first year to Becky Hammond's, because Becky Hammond was given
on a platter.
Becky Hammond was given, like, here you have Jack Young, you have Asia Wilson, you have Kelsey Plum, you have Chelsea Gray, and you have this bench with infinite depth. You know?
Yeah. And you know who, like you talked about Pokey Chapman and her impact in Indiana, her impact in Chicago. Now, Bill Laimbeer is a coach that I honestly find fascinating. To your point, do I agree? Have I agreed with what he's done? Absolutely not. On the record with certain things with Bill, I don't know what's going on. And he is effective in very specific pockets.
Yeah.
That being said, I've also gone on the record in saying to get the team to where it is now, to win championships, they needed Becky Hammond as a coach, but Bill Laimbeer was the engineer of that team. And Bill Laimbeer was coaching rookie Asia, rookie Kelsey. Technically sophomore Kelsey, because Vicky Johnson, that's a whole nother story.
True. Yeah.
Johnson got rookie Kelsey, but young players that are now on a super team. The starters for that super team. That's who Bill was coaching. And Asia Wilson, who just got the franchise scoring record Las Vegas Aces on a weekend where they were honoring their history in San Antonio and in Utah. One of the first things that she said is that Bill Laimbeer gave me the keys. Even though there was already Kelsey Plum there, even though she played alongside Kayla McBride. I think Kayla George came through there. There are all these other veterans or people who had more experience who are also proven and elite scorers. Bill Laimbeer did Asia the service, and it was hard on her a lot of the times, especially. But he made it clear. And honestly, this is something that I wish Sandy Brondello would do just a little bit more. But he made it clear this is Asia's team. Even before it looked like that was the good idea, he made it clear. And that's the vision. And mind you, Teresa Weatherspoon has been on a Liberty staff with Bill Laimbeer.
Exactly. So I feel like as media, it's our job to ask the questions. You know, we have to ask the questions. Teresa, talking to the media is part of the job. Taking the heat is part of the job. I do wish fans were a little kinder because I don't think she's doing a bad job. Time is going to prove us right or wrong. Honestly, we like I said first, we project based on the past, but we don't know what the future is going to be. But I know that Teresa is doing really well. Chuk, Angel Reese, Kennedy Carter, Camila Cardozo, Isabel Harrison. I went to the Sky practice. The respect that they have for Teresa, the way that they look at Teresa, and the way that Teresa looks at them as if you were like her children. This matters so much because you have like Kennedy Carter has been rejected by many teams. Angel Reese just got to the league coming under so much heat. The things that it almost makes me teary because the things that Angel Reese had to endure as like a young adult, a female, like in her teen, in her 19s still, that's not the kind of thing that you would wish on anyone. So yeah, Camila also, you watch the documentary and Dawn Staley talks about how much she can get into her head. They are young Black women who are coming from under a lot of scrutiny.
Yes.
Not having a coach who is not there for them first as people can ruin their career.
And you would never say that.
Yep.
That is Teresa Weatherspoon, which again makes me think that there was something that Teaspoon was like, you know what? I'm taking it off the table. If anyone has anything to say, they can say it to me. And
that's exactly what I think.
Came under Teaspoon as her teammate, Becky Hammon.
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
I get chills every time.
Yeah.
I covered the
shot, the half court shot.
I know, and
top moments in WNBA history.
But if you listen to what Becky Hammon says about her playing days, she went on to have success in San Antonio, but that success came because she found her game in New York. And it was Teresa Weatherspoon, Vicki Johnson, who, again, when it's all said and done, I think will not have the same respect put on her coaching days in the WNBA. And I do think that's unfortunate, but she still manages to be on coaching staffs. For whatever reason, she hasn't quite figured out the right balance of being the aggressive.
Yeah.
I'm demanding, I'm a very demanding coach, and maybe the passion, the compassion, and the love.
Yeah.
Because Teaspoon she's not easy. She does not take her players or anyone off the hook. That's not what they're saying. That's not why they love her. They love and respect her because, first of all, they know she's been there. And you can say the same about Vicki. But also, she has a way, if she is going to get into you about something, she will praise you with at least as much, if not more, energy on the positive side. And that's critically important for all of the players that you mentioned. And so again, this is my opinion, this is my gut. If I had to guess, and you were there, so you would know, and side note, I'm going to put in the quote and the little clip since you asked the question. I'm going to put it in there for the edit. But anyway, if I had just my gut, my instinct is telling me that there was something else going on. And you know what else actually I want to put on the table? Because this is also something that Sandy Brondello had a difficult time doing, that Becky Hammon had a difficult time doing last season. And those were the two teams in the playoffs. Sometimes you have to find ways to get your rotation in the game.
And the things that I feel like, and that's way outside of basketball, like there is this like need for instant gratification from fans, especially and we're talking about a team that has Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso. They come from victories, so fans are used
to them winning,
and to them being like coached by a coach that has been with them for years. The Chicago Sky is different. Teresa Weatherspoon has just gotten there. She has her reasons, and even if it's just to rest Camila because maybe she had something was hurting, if she just wanted to try Ezi, I think that if it was if you lose this game, you're out of the playoffs, I think it would be different.
Right.
I think, as a coach with the short amount of you have a short training camp, you don't play lots of preseason games.
Right. They were on the road, so they're not really practicing.
Unfortunately, a lot of newly formed team and first year coaches have to be experimental during the season. Because it's the long game. It's not there right now. Only one team is going to be champion this year. And we know if they are, I'll take any heat, but it's not going to be the Chicago Sky, and not because the Chicago Sky doesn't have championship power, but because
they're new.
It's the experiment, like their experiment. I mean, can you imagine Angel Reese becoming champions her first year? Now I want it. It will be such amazing story.
We would have to have an emergency podcast because the narrative would never end. But I would be personally here for it. I mean, I've gone on the record. We did over at CBS Sports preseason awards. I really hate doing that. I've talked about this on Black Rosie Media a bunch. I hate doing preseason predictions, but one that I felt very comfortable with, was Angel Reese as my rookie of the year.
Oh, I'm on the same. I'm on that.
I had
Yep,
it locked in since May. Check the record. I had
ROTY, baby.
That's it. So I don't know. I think, but to bring this back to Seattle, they capitalized.
They did, and they knew. Yeah, they knew it. I don't know if you saw the clip that I posted on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, when I asked Noe about the rebounds, I was not trying to bait her into talking about Camila. Like, I wasn't at all, because I was really like, whoa, from 27 rebounds to 36 in one day difference. Tell us what you're doing. I mean, we kind of knew that, like, the absence of Camila in the paint helped, but her answer was, what made it better this game?
Part of that, Camilla only played 20 minutes. She was out a little bit more.
So her saying that solidified people being so, like, critical of Teresa, because that's what, it's obvious for us, but in the moment of the game, I'm sure that she had a game plan. She had a scout that was like, lock on Camila, don't let her get rebounds. That had to change in the middle of the game, and she did it. She capitalized on it really well, and they beat the Sky beautifully. It was a commanding victory. The Storm needed that victory to kind of solidify them in the fourth position. If they hadn't, they could probably have fallen to fifth. So it was important. And Noelle Queen is that person that she's not going to give you the hype, but she's going to give you the results.
Yeah, agreed. And she is very opportunistic. And again, we talked about it earlier. Noelle Quinn is not, generally speaking, going to be necessarily hooting and hollering. And let's just say, as an example, Kim Mulkey. You might want to check if Noelle has a pulse, if you're comparing.
Yeah, that's true.
Mulkey brings to the sideline. Just as she's not that kind of coach. That being said, when so for me as an observer, when she does get animated, her team reacts to that because they know she's seeing something and that she's talking with urgency and that they need to get done what she's seeing. And I feel like that's exactly what happened with Chicago. And you have to respect that too. You have to respect it. So to be continued. Will we get more information? Will we learn more about coming on the other side of this? To be determined. But I think it's definitely something to keep an asterisk on with regard to Chicago, but also, again, like we said, a very critical win for Seattle.
Yeah, very important.
Closer to All-Star break, which again, we will have some All-Stars from Seattle going there. Yeah. But Roberta, we have wrapped our episode, our pilot.
that was fun.
I mean, I can't wait. So the first thing that's up for us and for you, especially at Black Rosie Media, is to help with some of our Olympic coverage, which we are going to be tasking you with keeping eyes on the Seattle Storm players in particular who are at the Olympics, because they're representing multiple countries. Yeah. I think is super cool. Just helping overall with the women's basketball tournament. So we are so grateful that you've joined us, and we cannot wait to embark on this beautiful journey.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be part of Black Rosie Media. I've always respected you and your work so much, and it just means a lot for me to be here, and I'm excited to, add to the conversation.
Indeed. Well, again, if you have specific questions for us as we continue on, not just with the Seattle Storm coverage, but especially as we transition to all things women's basketball in the Olympics, the best way to do that is to join us on the Black Rosie Media Slack channel. We have a general forum. We're going to be posting about not just women's basketball, but other sports as well. And then we also have communities specific to our podcast, which of course is Got to Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, and a to-be-named Seattle Storm podcast. Yeah. So make sure you join our growing community, especially during the Olympics, because I'm going to be in Paris. I'm going to be having all of our contributors breaking down the games generally, and then specifically from their WNBA team perspective. But for Roberta, my name again is Erica L. Ayala, and this has been our new podcast on Black Rosie.
Woo-hoo!
We cannot wait to continue to grow this family. And if you have any thoughts on what you would like either the podcast to be named or what we should give the nickname to our followers, make sure you hit us up again in the Black Rosie Media Slack. We look forward to hearing from you. But until the next episode, peace out, everybody.
Bye. Ciao.